Welcome to a deep dive into captivating an audience TED style. You've brought some excerpts from Carmine Gallo's Talk Like TED, and wow, this book's got some really interesting stuff in it. I mean, we're talking science, we're talking anecdotes, we're talking practical tips, like whether you're prepping for a big presentation or just want to be more engaging in everyday conversations. There's something in here for you.
It's true. These excerpts go way beyond just like the basics of a good presentation. They really get into like the heart of human connection, inspiration, even how we influence each other.
Yeah. So no more boring lectures, no more bullet points. We're going to unlock the secrets behind those talks that make you want to listen, that make you nod along, and most importantly, make you remember. And we're kicking things off with a fascinating fact. 18 minutes. Have you noticed how TED Talks kind of stick to that time frame?
Yeah, it's more than just a coincidence. The TED curator, Chris Anderson, he calls it a clarifying effect. That constraint, it forces speakers to really distill their message down to what matters.
It's like they say limitations breed creativity.
Exactly. And Carmine Gallo, he even compares it to how Twitter's character limit forces, short and impactful writing. But it's not just about being brief. There's actually some serious brain science going on here.
Okay, let's break that down. What is actually happening up there when we get hit with too much information?
So imagine your brain, like your email inbox, right? Too many emails, you get that cognitive backlog, right? Like those hour-long lectures, those meetings where you come out and you're like, what did we even talk about? That's cognitive backlog.
Oh, I've been there.
Yeah.
Trying to focus, but
Yeah.
your brain is just done.
Totally. Our brains just have a limited capacity for new information all at once. It needs time to process, to connect those dots. And research shows that 18 minutes, that's kind of the sweet spot. It's enough to go deep, but not too much to overwhelm people.
It's like the Goldilocks zone of presentations. Not too long, not too short, just the right amount to leave people thinking. Are there any TED Talks that you think really nail this?
Oh, for sure. David Christian's History of the Universe. He condenses like billions of years into this gripping 18-minute talk. It shows that a powerful message, even in a short time, can have a huge impact.
Wow, the whole history of the universe under 18 minutes. That's impressive. Speaking of impact, you can't deny the passion in these talks. You can feel the speaker's excitement, and it makes you want to listen.
It's infectious. Passion is like a speaker's secret weapon, and there's this management professor, Melissa Carton. She's done some really cool research on why it works so well.
Okay, now this is where it gets interesting. Tell me more about this research.
So she actually focused on entrepreneurial passion, but her findings apply to communication in general. She found that passion's more than just excitement. It affects your energy, your commitment, even how genuine people think you are.
So it's not just what you say, it's how you say it.
Yeah.
When you're truly passionate about something, it shows in your voice, your body language, everything.
Exactly. Think about someone describing like their favorite thing ever, right? Their eyes light up, their voice gets more animated. That's passion in action. It's really hard to resist.
You know what they say? Enthusiasm is contagious. You can't help but get swept up when someone's genuinely excited, especially if it's something they truly believe in.
And it gets results. Carden found that investors are more likely to support entrepreneurs who show that true passion for their ideas. They can spot a fake a mile away, but when they see that genuine belief, it's magnetic.
It's like that story in the book about the strawberry grower, the executive.
Yeah.
He got so choked up talking about California strawberries that he actually started crying during a presentation.
That's such a good example. His vulnerability, that raw emotion, it created this connection with the audience that was so much deeper, so much more memorable.
It just goes to show that vulnerability can be incredibly powerful, especially when you're speaking in public.
And that brings us to another key ingredient in a great TED Talk: storytelling.
Oh, storytelling's huge. These speakers are masters at weaving narratives into their talks, and it's way more engaging than just facts and figures.
You're so right. And storytelling isn't just a nice to have. It's literally how our brains are wired to connect with information.
The book mentions Bryan Stevenson, the civil rights attorney, who got a standing ovation and $1 million in donations after his TED Talk.
Exactly. Bryan Stevenson's talk, it's proof of how powerful personal stories can be. He didn't overload people with legal jargon. Instead, he shared these powerful stories about the people he represented. He brought in personal anecdotes that everyone could connect with.
And it's not just anecdotal, right? There's real science backing this up. The book talks about Uri Hasson and his research on how stories can actually sync our brains.
Hasson's work is amazing. He used fMRI imaging, and found that when someone's listening to a story, their brain activity actually starts to mirror the storytellers. It's like our brains are literally getting on the same wavelength. That's how powerful that connection is.
So stories don't just entertain. They make information easier to understand and remember.
Exactly. And Talk Like TED actually breaks down 3 types of stories that are super effective. Personal stories, which create that connection, stories about other people, which give you these relatable lessons, and then brand stories, which show how things work in the real world.
And there's a powerful example of this in the book. This executive who brought in a personal story about the United Way into his presentation. And you know what? His heartfelt story got him a standing ovation and a record number of donations.
That's the power of a good story. It takes your presentation from just information to an experience that moves people to action.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about another fascinating aspect of these TED Talks, the surprise factor, right? It seems like our brains crave something new, wouldn't you say?
Totally. It's like novelty is crack for our brains, you know?
Hmm.
The book even talks about James Cameron, the Titanic director. He was so curious about the actual shipwreck that it made him want to explore it, and that's what inspired the whole movie.
Talk about turning passion into a mega hit. That's amazing how that thirst for knowledge can lead to such incredible things.
Absolutely. And get this, there's actually a neurological reason for it. When we come across something new, our brains release dopamine, and that's linked to pleasure and reward. It's that whole brain save button thing from the book.
Oh, right. Dr. Martha Burns, the neuroscientist, she called dopamine like a mental highlighter, making us pay attention and remember new stuff better.
Exactly. Presenting information in a fresh and surprising way, it doesn't just grab our attention, it makes it stick.
A perfect example is Hans Rosling's TED Talk. He used this software called Trendalizer to make statistics come alive. Instead of boring old charts, he had these animated bubbles representing global health data. So cool.
Rosling's talk was brilliant. He took data that could have been so dry and turned it into something dynamic and unforgettable. And speaking of unforgettable, Talk Like TED also talks about the power of what Carmine Gallo calls jaw-dropping moments.
Oh yeah, those whoa moments that make you sit up straight. Those unexpected, emotionally charged things that you remember long after the talk is over. Like Bill Gates letting mosquitoes loose on stage. Shocking for sure, but man, was it effective.
Definitely got people talking about malaria. Those jaw-dropping moments are all about creating what scientists call emotionally charged events. They release hormones like norepinephrine, and that boosts memory and makes things stick.
So our brains remember the things that shake things up a little.
Exactly. And these moments, they don't have to be as dramatic as releasing mosquitoes. Even simple visuals, if they're used creatively, can be super impactful. Remember the story about Phil Schiller, Apple's marketing VP? He used a regular pencil to show how thin the iPad mini was at its launch.
Oh yeah, such a good example. So much better than just saying how thin it was.
Right. That one visual made it real, made it memorable. Another good example is that agribusiness company that used their product's packaging, this green box, as a prop.
They were going to use boring old PowerPoint slides, but bringing in that actual box made it real.
It created this tangible connection to what they were talking about, made the whole thing way more engaging. Sometimes you gotta think outside the box, literally.
For sure. And while we're on the topic of shaking things up, we can't forget humor. It's not just about getting laughs, it's about connecting with the audience, making them feel comfortable.
100%. Sir Ken Robinson's talk on education, it's a masterclass in using humor well. He mixes jokes and stories into his talk so smoothly, making what could be a dry topic both entertaining and thought-provoking.
And there's science behind it too. Laughter releases endorphins, those feel-good chemicals that actually make us more open to new info.
It's true. Laughter lowers stress hormones like cortisol, so your audience is relaxed and ready to listen.
It's all about creating that positive vibe where people are primed to really engage.
Exactly. Talk Like TED even breaks down the types of humor that work well. Observational humor, self-deprecating humor, even just using quotes the right way.
One of my favorites is The Economist, Enriquez. During his TED Talk, right in the middle of the 2009 recession, he put up a completely black slide and labeled it The Economy. Talk about using visuals to create a shared, we've all been there laugh.
Oh, that was genius. He acknowledged the elephant in the room without being heavy or bringing the mood down.
Okay, so we've got passion, storytelling, surprise, humor. What other tricks do these TED Talks use to keep us glued to our seats?
Let's talk about engaging the senses. Think about how much richer an experience is when it's not just about listening. TED Talks often use multiple senses to make their presentations even more powerful.
You know the saying, tell me and I forget, teach me and I may remember, involve me and I learn. It's about making information an actual experience, not just an idea.
Exactly. Talk Like TED uses Al Gore's An Inconvenient Truth as a prime example. The visuals in that were so powerful in getting the urgency of climate change across.
They weren't just pictures, they made the issue real in a way words couldn't.
And the book mentions how those visuals actually inspired Laurie David to produce the documentary based on Gore's presentation. Talk about a call to action.
It's amazing how powerful a multi-sensory experience can be. So it's not just about throwing in bells and whistles. It's about using them strategically to strengthen the message.
Right. You know the TED commandment, use visuals to enhance words, not duplicate.
I love that. It's about making sure visuals work with what you're saying, not just repeating it.
Exactly. The book also talks about Richard Mayer's multimedia learning theory. Basically, it says that our brains learn better when we get information from multiple channels.
And that means we have to be aware of how bad we are at multitasking. Our brains aren't meant to process a ton of different information streams all at once.
You got it. If a presentation has text-heavy slides, distracting visuals, and someone talking about something else entirely, the audience is going to zone out.
It's just too much. So clear, concise visuals that work with the speaker are super important for keeping people engaged.
Absolutely. The book highlights some TED speakers who are amazing at this, like Lise Christine, who used incredibly powerful photos to expose modern-day slavery, and Amanda Palmer, who actually stood on a crate to illustrate her point about street performance.
Such creative and impactful ways to get the audience involved. Speaking of impact, let's go back to something we talked about earlier, the power of three. It's everywhere, right?
Oh, the rule of three. It's a classic rhetorical trick that's been used forever to make information memorable and persuasive. Think about it. The three little pigs, the three musketeers, it's ingrained in us.
That's true. Talk Like TED even points out how this rule pops up everywhere, from history and famous brands to everyday sayings, and even religion.
And there's a reason. Our short-term memory can only handle about 3 chunks of information at a time, so grouping things in threes makes it easier to process and remember. It's not just about style, it's a strategy to make your message hit harder.
It's like they say, good things come in threes. Or, in this case, memorable messages come in threes. The book mentions Neil Pasricha's TEDx talk, The 3 A's of Awesome, as a great example.
Pasricha's talk is a perfect example. He structured his whole talk around those 3 key ideas: attitude, awareness, and authenticity. It was clear, concise, and so easy to remember.
And Talk Like TED wants everyone to try this in their presentations. They recommend making a message map to organize your ideas into those groups of 3.
Message maps are great. They help you clarify your message and structure your presentation so it's both engaging and easy for the audience to follow.
It's like a roadmap for your talk, making sure you get those key points across. You know, hearing about all these amazing speakers and their stories, it really makes you think about how important authenticity is.
Oh, absolutely. Talk Like TED, it emphasizes that throughout. When the audience feels that real connection, that genuine energy from the speaker, it adds a whole other level.
There's this story in the book about Janine Shepherd, the cross-country skier, who was paralyzed after an accident. Her TED Talk on overcoming adversity, it's incredibly powerful, and you can feel her authenticity shining through.
Oh yeah, her story is incredible, so moving. The way she talks about the challenges she faced physically and emotionally, and how she found the strength to rebuild her life. And she even uses these 5 chairs as props to represent the different stages, which makes it even more real for the audience.
That visual element, it's like another layer to her story, a reminder that being vulnerable isn't a weakness, it can be a strength. When we're willing to share our struggles, our wins authentically, it resonates with people so much more deeply.
Exactly. You don't have to be perfect to be a great speaker. Actually, it's often the imperfections and how we overcome those that make our stories relatable, that make our message stick.
The book also mentions Richard Branson and how he really emphasizes speaking from the heart. He's so engaging, so charismatic, and he credits that to just being himself, letting his personality come through.
Branson's a great example of how being genuine can be so magnetic. He's not afraid to show his passion, to laugh at himself, to just be excited about his ideas. And it's that human connection that makes him so captivating.
It's refreshing. It's a good reminder that connecting with people isn't about trying to fit some mold of the perfect speaker. It's about finding your own voice, what makes you unique, and letting your passion shine through.
Right. And that's a big message in Talk Like TED, finding your lane, figuring out what you're passionate about, and then sharing that authentically.
It's empowering. We all have something to offer, and the most impactful communication comes from that place of passion and authenticity. Before we wrap up our deep dive, I want to touch on one more thing: practice.
Oh, practice is huge. Doesn't matter if you're a seasoned speaker or just starting out, it's essential for getting comfortable with your message, for polishing your delivery, for building that confidence to connect with your audience.
Talk Like TED talks about how some of the best TED speakers approach practice, like Amanda Palmer, the musician. She rehearses meticulously, gets feedback from friends, family, even strangers to make sure her message lands.
Palmer's commitment to really honing her craft is inspiring. It shows how practice isn't just memorizing lines, it's about trying things out, getting different perspectives, and figuring out how to deliver your message in the most effective way possible.
It's about really owning your story, connecting with it on a deeper level. The book quotes Dr. Jill Bolt Taylor, a neuroanatomist, who said, "When I was at Harvard, I wasn't winning awards because my science was better than anyone else's. I was winning awards because I could tell a story that was interesting and fascinating, and it was mine, down to the detail."
That's such a great point. It shows how practice helps us become better speakers, but also how it helps us really connect with our own stories, our messages, in a deeper way.
It's like that Oprah Winfrey quote. You've got to follow your passion. You've got to figure out what it is you love, who you really are, and have the courage to do that. Practice gives us that space to do that, to find our voice and share it with the world.
Beautifully said. It's a journey, and it takes dedication, vulnerability, and putting yourself out there.
It really does. Well, I think that's a perfect place to wrap things up. We've explored some awesome insights from Talk Like TED today: the 18-minute rule, storytelling, surprise, humor, using all the senses. So much good stuff.
We went deep on those subtle but super important things too, like passion, authenticity, and practicing consistently the things that take a good presentation and make it unforgettable.
So to everyone listening, think about how you can apply these takeaways not just to big presentations, but to your everyday interactions. How can you be more engaging in those everyday conversations?
The key is that being captivating isn't about following a rigid formula. It's about understanding what makes people connect and then using those principles authentically and meaningfully in any situation.
It's about owning your voice, embracing your passions, and sharing your ideas in a way that feels true to you. And Talk Like TED gives us the tools to do exactly that.
It's a good reminder that we all have the power to captivate, to inspire, to make a difference with our words. It doesn't matter the setting.
So go out there, be yourself, share your stories, and let your ideas be heard. Until next time, keep those conversations going.